Today we're going to tell you why we need restitution and reparation from the Roman Catholic Church.
So, let's talk about how the Roman Catholic Church contributed in the transatlantic slave trade. First, they instructed Portugal and Spain to invade, murder, and subdue all sub-Saharan Africans. They identified us as black Gentiles, which took away our rights, and they created laws that told people how to treat black people unfairly. Let's also not forget how the Roman Catholic Church benefited from the transatlantic slave trade. One, they had a huge increase in tithes. Two, they had a big gain of political power. Let's also not forget how my ancestors' land was acquired by the Roman Catholic Church to build more Catholic churches like this one.
Let me tell you how my ancestors were affected during the transatlantic slave trade. One, they violated our rights and privileges. Two, they stole our lands and our resources. Three, they destroyed our family culture and our family structure.
And you can't forget how black people are still affected by the transatlantic slave trade to this day. One, we don't have access to our own land. Two, we can't trace back our own family lineage. And three, we can't connect with our own people because our identity is lost.
And after hearing all of that, we're here to tell you that we need restitution and reparation from the Roman Catholic Church.
Right now!
Today.
Hello, you guys. Okay, so let's go ahead and just get into this video. First of all, let me say this. You guys know how I feel about reparations. If you don't, I have a few videos you can watch on my channel. One is the color of reparations is not green. That one is public. I believe it's public. It's a little bit risque, so you can see. And then one is private, and it's called Black People Are Very Forgiving. So I'm not here to push into reparations. Now, the title of this video, Candace Owens, Slaves Did Not Build America, They Slowed Down Progress. I literally named my video that because she asked that if you had a problem with what she said, she suggested that be the title, that slaves slowed down progress, that they didn't build America. So I used her video title suggestion because I thought it was very fitting, right? I thought it was extremely fitting to do exactly what she said. So with that said, her original commentary was on this Proud Family cartoon. I have never actually seen the television show, The Proud Family. This clip, I believe, may be the first clip I've ever seen of it. From what I've seen, I'm not a fan. So why don't we start with the clip from The Proud Family, then we'll get into Candace Owens' commentary, and we'll get into me debunking her commentary. Meanwhile, shout out to the Zayx Institute. That little video that you saw at the beginning, those were the students from the Zayx Institute. You guys know that I taught there, for 3 or 4 years. I'm the vice principal there now. Love our babies. Oh, some of those children were former students of mine. So shout out to them for the reparations video. You know, Miss Irina's pro socio-political revolution. So for me, you know, that's not a thing, but I love that the children have the acumen to understand and make a video like that. With that said, let's go ahead and get into the Proud Family footage. This was ridiculous. Now, you guys know that I'm a conservative. So I am not here to big up the Proud Family. But I'm also not with the foolery, which is why we're going to talk about Candace Owens, the stuff that she's on. That's a problem too. So let me go ahead and share my screen. And we'll start with what all the hoopla is about.
This country was built on slavery, which means slaves built this country. Tilled this land from sea to sea to sea. First there was rice, tobacco, sugar cane. Then Whitney did his thing and cotton became king. And we were its soldiers, 4 million strong, fighting for America's freedoms, even though we remained America.
Now, can I just say, first and foremost, one thing that I cannot stand, one thing that I hate with a passion, is that I don't know if this is geared toward children. I don't know if this is a television show that's supposed to be for adults, but I find that when they create movies, books, everything just geared toward Black people, it's always about a freaking struggle. There's always a gangbanger, somebody struggling. It's about slavery. It's about oppression. It's about, pulling yourself up out of the ghetto. It's a broken family. I get tired of that. I just like to see Black people living their best life. I don't want to have to watch movies with non-Black people in them just so I can get a good movie where people have money and their little problems are, did they fall in love at the ski resort? You know what I mean? Just a regular movie about regular Black people living their best lives and having silly little problems. That's all that I want. I don't want anybody to play sports. I don't want to see anybody bouncing nor throwing a ball. I don't want to see anybody smoking a pipe or slinging drugs. I just want to see, I don't want to hear about, you know what I mean? I'm just tired of that. So off top, I don't like this because, my goodness, does everything geared toward Black people have to be, about being super woke and, talking about the trials and tribulations of our people? Like, it's old. It's old. You guys know I acknowledge the trials and tribulations, but darn it, nobody wants to be entertained with that crap. That's not entertaining. This is my opinion, so I already have a problem with this.
Slaves built this country. The descendants of slaves continue to build it. Slaves built this country. And we, the descendants of slaves in America, have earned reparations for their suffering and continue to earn reparations every moment we spend submerged in the systemic prejudice, racism, and white supremacy that America was founded with and still has not atoned for. Slaves built.
Why is that? Are these children? Does she have blonde hair and she's fat at the same time? I can't with the stereotypes, but let's continue.
This country, not only field hands, but carpenters, masons, blacksmiths, musicians, inventors built cities from Jamestown to New Orleans to Banneker, Washington. 40 acres and a mule. We'll take the 40 acres, keep the mule. We made your families rich. From the southern plantation heirs to the northern bankers to the New England ship owners, the founding father.
It's the faces and everything for me. I just don't like this kind of thing, y'all. I can see right now, this is the kind of show that I would not like. I could never be into this. So you get the idea. I mean, I'm going to stop. I can't possibly watch any more of this. Slaves built the country. Reparations for all. That's the point of the clip. It's not my vibe. I don't like all this, fist pumping, slavery, drug dealing, popping bottles type stuff aimed at Black people. I'm not into that. However, Candace Owens and I agree that we're not into it, but where we disagree is where we take this, okay? Because I think that was idiotic and I don't support it. The Proud Family, based on what I just saw, is nothing that I'm interested in. However, slaves did build this country. Okay, they did. I don't like the Proud Family. From what I've seen, I can pass, but I'm not going to say that didn't occur, right? I'm not pro reparations because I don't think there's a dollar amount, but I'm not pro what went on in that clip. With that said, I want to get to Candace Owens' commentary because this is actually what my commentary is on. I just wanted to give the context of what is initiating what she is saying and what I am about to talk about. So I wanted to add some context around that. So let's get started. Let me share my screen. Oscar Proud would take me out. I probably need to stay away from that whole program. I'm irritated just at that clip. That one little clip has me pressed. I'm like, I'll pass. All right. So I have 3 comments from her that I want to specifically address in this video. Now, in this first set of comments, she's going to assert that the majority of white people did not own slaves in the slaveholding states, I'm supposing is what she's referring to. And that it was poor people, not slaveholders, who fought in the Civil War. And that there were other components to the Civil War outside of slavery. So these are the 3 assertions she's going to make in this first clip that I'm going to play. And I am going to refute 2 of 3 of those things. And I actually agree with one of them. You guys will find out which one of those 3 assertions I actually agree with.
Telling the truth about the history of slavery by saying that the majority of people did not have slaves. Obviously, a very small fraction of uber wealthy people had slaves, people that were fighting the Civil War. It was a poor man's fight and a rich man's war. They were not fighting to keep slavery in place. They didn't have slaves, right? There was other components of the Civil War. People don't like to talk about that. Well, I'm going to say something else that's going to offend people because it's true, right? The idea that this country and the success that this country had is because slaves built this country. History betrays this narrative, okay? Let me first say, obviously, we all know slavery was abhorrent. It was an abhorrent.
Okay, now she said history betrays this narrative that slaves built the country. She's going to give the caveat that slavery was evil. She's going to talk about how white people didn't invent slavery. Slavery's been going on for all of human history. I have a whole video addressing this. So that's why I'm not doing a commentary on this. You guys know that I have a video. The title of the video is White Men Ended Slavery, Respect It. And I easily refute with historical facts and many, many references everything that she's about to say. Like, I just tear that to shreds. So that is why I'm not going to address this next 3 seconds of comments, because there's just no point. I made a whole video basically ripping that down to a million pieces historically.
Just all over the world did not begin in America, and actually did not begin with white people, right? It still goes on today, and it is Black and brown people that keep those institutions up. And actually, white people were the first people to end the institutions of slavery. France, the United Kingdom, followed by America. We were the first to put an end and to abolish slavery. So there's no question that it was an abhorrent practice. There's no question that it leaves a stain on all of the histories around the world, right? Forget just American history, all around the world, it leaves a stain. But the idea that,
man, you guys know, before we get to the part that, before I start my presentation, there is a comment on a recent Matt Walsh video where he's ranting about something and he says, the argument that someone else did it too is not a defense. Y'all, I wish I would have grabbed that clip right then, because I don't have the patience to like go back through his live streams to figure out which of the past 2 or 3 live streams he said that in. But when I heard him say that, I said, man, this is hypocrisy. In fact, I'm closing this presentation with how hypocritical these people are. This is why the Republican Party will get nothing out of actual Black conservatives, because you guys are hypocrites. Not Matt Walsh talking about someone else did it too is not a defense, when literally the whole argument from the Republican Party regarding slavery is someone else did it too. That's their whole argument. It took me, man, when I tell you I was on the floor when I heard those words come out of his mouth, I was like, now, sir, not you talking about someone else did it too is not a defense. I will find that clip. If you guys watch Matt Walsh and you heard him say that, send me the timestamp for that in the video. It is one of the past 3 videos he made. You guys, these words left his mouth. They not about slavery. He was talking about something totally different. But I just was thinking, like, it's flipping amazing how they understand other people did it too as not a defense when they want to understand it. But when they want to play slavery apologetics, all of a sudden other people did it too is the defense. Like, I can't do it. It's actually laughable. It really, really is.
America was built because of slaves is so foolish. There's a reason why when the Civil War ended and when slavery was abolished, America was thrust into the Industrial Revolution, because in the absence of using slaves, they had.
She's an actual idiot. And this is where my presentation is going to start. It's going to start with the words, she is either purposefully being obtuse or she is an actual idiot. I want you to listen to the last thing she just said. She says, when slavery ended, America was thrust into the Industrial Revolution. And her entire premise that slaves didn't build America is based on the fact that after slavery, when you could no longer have slaves, America was forced, right? America was forced into the Industrial Revolution. So let me go to my presentation. Let's step away from Candace for a second. Let's step away from Candace for a second and let's go to my presentation because there's a few things I'm about to address. The first thing being that the Industrial Revolution did not come after slavery. I just want to throw that out. I'm going to give you guys the dates, but not her talking about the Industrial Revolution came after slavery. Ma'am, don't start talking history. You don't even know when the Industrial Revolution happened. Not that. Not us saying that the end of slavery prompted the Industrial Revolution. Are you kidding me? That is a joke. That's a joke right there. But let's start with one of her first assertions. The first thing she said is most white people did not own slaves. My argument is going to be 1 in every 3 people in the Confederate States own slaves. That's going to be my assertion, and I'm about to prove that now. American historian Alan Nevis is responsible for the assertion that only 1.26% of the Southern white people own slaves. I'm sure you've heard this before. This has been going around for some time, right? It's Alan Nevin's fault. He based his assertion on the 1850 census, in which it was reported that there were about 6,184,477 whites that lived in slave states, and only 347,525 of them were listed as actual slave owners. Additionally, in the 1860 census, which was on the eve of the Civil War, there were only 393,975 slave owners in the United States out of a total population of 31,183,582, or 1.2% of the population. Now, that sounds fabulous. Nice, solid statistical data, right? However, the above statistics ignore some really important things. Number one, of the 33 states in the Union, 15 were slave states and 18 were free states. Of the population of 12,240,293 of the slave states, it is true that only 393,975 individuals were listed as slave owners. That's actually 3.22%, right? Because we're only looking at slaveholding states. We can't count the population of the entire country when the entire country were not slaveholding states. So the first thing we have to do is only look at states where slavery was legal. In the states that slavery was legal, 3.22% of the population was listed as directly owning slaves. However, we also have to consider when we talk about that 12 million population of the slave states, we're also including the slaves. Well, obviously, if you're in slavery, you shouldn't be counted in the people who can own slaves. So if we remove all of the slaves, that brings the population of the southern states down from 12,000 to, from 12 million down to 8,289,782. That means that now the stat is going up. We've gone from 1.26% up to 4.75%, because now we're only looking at slaveholding states. We're excluding all the people who are slaves, clearly, because why would we count the slaves? They're not slave owners. And we're only looking at the free population. So now we're at 4.75%, but it doesn't stop there. It doesn't stop there because remember, I'm going to prove that 1 in every 3 white people essentially own slaves. How am I about to prove that? Because we have to isolate the Confederate states. Remember, there were 18 slaveholding states, but the Civil War wasn't about all of the slaveholding states. It was regarding the 11 Confederate states. The Confederate states, you know, the ones who wanted to secede from the Union. That's what started the Civil War. So if we look specifically at the Confederate states, the states that the whole Civil War was fought behind, the percentage goes up because 80% of all slaveholders were in the Confederate states. 80% of all the slaveholders were in the Confederate states, or 316,632, which brings the percentage up even higher to 5.67%. So we started at 1.2%. Now we're at 5.67%. But that's not the end of it, right? Mostly white men owned slaves. However, these white men had wives and sons who had not yet inherited their plantations or daughters. So you might have one white man listed as owning slaves, but he had a wife, he had children. And if we look at the US Census from 1860, what we find is that in fact, 30.8% of all families in the South owned slaves. Not individual white people, but families, right? So you have a plantation and a white family lives on the plantation. And if we don't just look at the head of household, but we look at the household, then 30.8% of all white people in those Confederate states were slave owners. In other words, 1 out of every 3 white people, which debunks this assertion that it was a small minority of people, a teeny, itty bitty elite group of people who owned slaves. It wasn't. And that old statistic of 1.26% is completely wrong because it includes actual slaves when they're counting the number of bodies of possible slave owners. And when you peel away the surface, you only look at the slaveholding states, you only count people who aren't actually slaves. When you look at the Confederate states, who are the only relevant ones because they're the ones that caused the Civil War, right? It turns out it's 1 in every 3. 1 in every 3. And I could dig into this more and talk about people who were not slave owners, but rented slaves, because there were a lot of people who did not own slaves, but they rented slaves. That was a thing where you would rent another person's slaves to do work on your property or to work in your home. That was extremely common. So I think if I really had the time or energy, I could even drive that statistic up higher using factual data about people who did not directly own slaves, but who rented slave labor, making them participants and complicit. So it wasn't just a poor man's battle in the Confederate States of people who really didn't own slaves. That's not how that worked. I think if I included not just people who owned slaves, but people who worked on plantations like overseers and individuals who rented slaves, that statistic would go even higher than 1 out of every 3 whites. But I will give Candace Owens this. She is correct. Not every single white person in the United States owned slaves. Not every single white person in the South owned slaves, but it surely wasn't a little teeny tiny splash of a minority. That is absolutely incorrect. It's false and it's historically inaccurate. Let's move on. And Dame Piglet, no. She was talking she literally uses the words Confederate States. If you watch that very short video, the words Confederate States comes out of her mouth. So I'm not even going to argue that point. She is correct, and this is where I agree with her. The Civil War was not about Black people. Nobody cared about Black people. The abolitionists, so-called, didn't care about Black people. The North didn't care about Black people, and the South didn't care about Black people. The Civil War was about power and states' rights. It was. All right? Because if the Confederacy had been a separate nation, it would have been the fourth richest nation on earth. Because the North had nothing, and the Confederate States had everything because of slave labor. Nobody really cared about the slaves at all. So Candace Owens and I agree, the Civil War was not about slavery. Slavery was a tool used to manipulate and garner support to fight the Confederate States and to prevent them from seceding from the Union. But what the government was really concerned about at the federal level was losing all of America's wealth, because the Southern states did not need the North. They would secede and become the world's fourth largest superpower, period. They had no use for the rest of the country. And they certainly had no use for a bunch of countrymen that were going to infringe on their ability to engage in free market. So I agree with Candace Owens that the Civil War was bigger than slavery. Now, she says that it was the end of slavery that propelled the Industrial Revolution. I'm going to debunk that in a minute, but she also says it was the inventors, not the slaves, that propelled the Industrial Revolution. So does she mean inventors like Louis Latimer, the person who really made the light bulb a thing? Does she mean the many Black innovators who, because it was illegal for them to actually have patents, their owners or other white people would simply patent their inventions for them? Does she mean the person that invented the vacuum evaporator that gives us what we call refined white sugar today? Does she mean the inventor of the cotton gin? Those group of enslaved people who innovated the cotton gin? Does she mean the inventor of the first American striking clock? Does she mean the inventor of the machines that were allowed us to start industrialized farming, those seed planting machines? Does she mean all of these Black inventors? Are these the people that she's referring to? I'm pretty sure she was thinking of white people when she made that comment. I'm sure she doesn't actually know that. And this is just a splash in the bucket. I could go further, but I simply don't have the time. But even if I were to agree with her that the Industrial Revolution was propelled by the ending of slavery, because after you didn't have slave labor, you needed to invent things, even though that is literally false, then I would have to look at all the inventions of Black people that propelled the Industrial Revolution, both those that were enslaved and freed. I couldn't avoid it. Now, with all that said, Candace Owens is an idiot because the Industrial Revolution didn't come after slavery. The first thing we need to do is state that obvious fact, right? The biggest and dumbest thing to come out of her mouth was that the Industrial Revolution occurred after slavery. Ma'am, no, that's not how that worked. The Industrial Revolution was between 1750 and 1840. And a simple cursory glance at any sort of history book will let you know that slavery ended in 1865. Let me repeat that for the stupid people in the room. The Industrial Revolution, by the widest estimates from everybody, all the historians, ranged from 1750 to 1840. Slavery ended in 1865. So no, Candace Owens, slavery did not end, and the lack of slave labor propelled people into creating things which prompted the Industrial Revolution. That never happened. The Industrial Revolution occurred during slavery. The Industrial Revolution ended before slavery did. I don't even know why she would say that. Why even say something idiotic like that? That doesn't make sense. That's like completely historically inaccurate. That's just, I mean, out of all the dumb stuff she said, to base her entire argument on a literal historical fallacy was dumb. That was dumb. It was either dumb or it was intentionally deceitful, because most people won't even take the time to take a breath to see if that's even accurate, based on the fact that most people off their dome don't actually know when the Industrial Revolution happened. Right? However, let's play her game. Let's make believe that the Industrial Revolution did happen after slavery. It didn't, but what if it did, right? What occurred after slavery that contributed to the industrial growth of the country? After we've established Candace Owens doesn't actually understand history at all, she doesn't know when the Industrial Revolution happened, let's move forward to, what did occur after slavery. So I want to talk about the first thing first. During slavery, the market value of enslaved people alone was $4 billion. The bodies of Black people was worth more than every bank and every railroad in this country combined. The cotton that the slaves grew provided for over half of all U.S. export earnings. 50% of the economy was simply based on cotton that slaves were picking. Tobacco, cotton, sugarcane were literally the economic engines of these United States for almost 400 years, because remember, when the United States gained its independence, Great Britain stopped buying tobacco, which is why slave labor was then progressed to cotton and sugarcane. By 1840, the South grew 60 to 75% of the entire world's cotton. 70% of the cotton that the British used for their textile manufacturing came from slave labor in the United States. Slavery and the money that was made during slavery paid for a substantial share of the capital of iron and the goods that were manufactured to support the economic growth of the Industrial Revolution that occurred during slavery, Candace Owens. It did not occur after slavery. The Industrial Revolution occurred during slavery and ended before slavery ended, with all of these factors and many others coming into play. So outside of literally arguing that somehow slavery existed for almost 400 years, but America derived no benefit from it whatsoever, which is clearly an idiotic statement to make, you add insult to injury when you don't even understand that the Industrial Revolution ran in tandem with slavery and ended before slavery ended. But what about after slavery ended, right? What about after slavery ended? Let's just talk a little bit about that. In states like Georgia, convict leasing propelled the state into the industrial age by laying hundreds of miles of new tracks, which allowed for them to jumpstart coal mining and rock quarry industries, which were a huge part of that economic boom following slavery. In fact, using Georgia, as an example, again, the first prison labor contract in 1868 only leased African American prisoners. And they leased them to the Georgia and Alabama Railroad. That agreement to only use African American prison labor was signed by military governor General Thomas Ruger. The agreement actually assured that the company would get 100 able-bodied and healthy Negro convicts. That is verbatim from the contract. And I could pull hundreds of other contracts with similar wording because that is history. In fact, female prisoners were even enslaved. They performed domestic duties in prison camps, and they were used as domestic labor in the homes, as well as doing regular old manual labor with the men. There were white prisoners that were part of this complex, but most of the prisoners were Black. And this was not an exception with the women, who were often arrested simply for doing things like arguing in public or using profanity. They could be sold into indentured servitude for major corporations because they cursed in the streets. Many institutions in the late 1800s and early 1900s employed convict labor as ways to avoid strikes and shortages of laborers. Why deal with the union when you can just arrest some Black people and then force them to work in your factory? Most leased convicts were African Americans, and that is indisputable. I pulled up some historical documents because, you know, there's always somebody that thinks you made stuff up, and I will be providing all of my sources in the description box at the end of this presentation. Convict. So over here, if you look at this document over here, this is a folio of a convict lease bid submitted by Joseph E. Brown for the use of prisoners at Dade Coal Mine. He proposes to hire all of the penitentiary convicts who have life in prison for a period of 20 years. For using these prisoners for 20 years straight, he's going to pay $20 per person per year. Over here, you see, much like you would during slavery times, a reward poster. The Chattahoochee Brick Company, aka the Death Camp, as it was called, set a reward to catch 7 prisoners who had escaped from their brick company. This was a real thing. We can see a chain gang of men that were building a railroad line in Macon in 1900, and their white supervisors standing above them as they're down in the pit. Here is an interesting article here. There was a Black woman who got injured. She was a little girl. I shouldn't say Black woman. She was a girl. She was badly burned, had 3rd-degree burns, and they were looking for other Black people that were willing to donate their skin to repair the girl because she had been being used for prison labor in one of these convict leasing programs for one of the companies and sustained some major injuries. This device that you see in this picture over here is actually a torture device that was used to punish prisoners who weren't working hard enough at the factory. But you know, Black people didn't contribute anything to building anything. That's why they needed to torture them to get them to build the stuff. This was really fascinating to me. There was breeding going on. So here we have an article about births in the prison camps. There was a woman who testified that had been in prison for 14 years and had given birth to 7 children during that time. Because, slavery was over. Looking at the Black codes, and I did a whole video regarding this, so I'm not going to get too deep into it. Convict leasing was used to create a system of involuntary servitude to fill the labor shortage in the southern states. Arrests of Black people were made for things like walking on the grass or not having a job. In fact, there were literally peoples whose jobs it was, they were basically professional crime hunters, who were paid by the head. So for every criminal that you arrested, you got a check. And when the factories needed workers, surprise, surprise, there were more apprehensions of criminals. The convict leasing program went through, not up until, but through World War II. I want to talk about some major players who really benefited from this convict leasing program. The Tennessee Coal, Iron, and Railroad Company, a company that we now know as the United States Steel Corporation, that thing exists today. They were one of the 12 original companies on the Dow Industrial Index, and they were also one of the largest users of prison laborers, mostly African-American laborers who had been accused of petty crimes. This is a corporation that exists until this day, although under a different name, the new name being U.S. Steel. But that's not all. We have people like John T. Milliner, who was originally a slaveholder in the southern states, an engineer and a businessman. He was literally dubbed the father of Southern industrialization, specifically within the Deep South. He is known far and wide for not only using chattel slave labor, but after slavery was, abolished, he used slave labor via the convict leasing system. He was the chief engineer at the South and North Alabama Railroad Company, which was eventually acquired by the Savannah and Western Railroad Company, and eventually the Central Railroad and Banking Company. You can see his picture there and the final owner of the company there. This company did not actually fall apart until 1988. How many of you were alive in 1988 is the question. Let's follow the money some more. James W. Sloss founded Birmingham Sloss Furnaces. What they did is they transformed coal and ore from surrounding acres into the hard steel that was used to build all the stuff that we needed during this industrial revolution. In fact, Sloss Furnaces was once the largest manufacturer of pig iron in the world. They didn't close until the 70s, and there's a national historic landmark in the company's honor till this day. You can go visit it if you'd like. Now, I thought I was going to go back to Candace Owens' clip, but I can't really listen to more of her. You can go to her channel and you can watch that if you really want to. But here's the hypocrisy. This is the hypocrisy for me. Ben Shapiro, remember when him and Candace Owens got into that little fight with each other? Because Candace Owens was co-signing Max Blumenthal when he said, "We, white American Jews, are living through a golden age of power and affluency and safety. Acceptance of this welcome reality threatens the entire Zionist empire, from lobby fronts like ADL to the state of Israel, because Zionism relies on Jewish insecurity to justify itself." Max Blumenthal is a Jew, and he said this about Jewish people. I want to repeat what he said. And then I almost made a video about this whole thing because it really points out the hypocrisy. of white conservatives. He says, we white American Jews are living through a golden age of power, affluence, and safety. Acceptance of this welcome reality threatens the entire Zionist enterprise, from lobby fronts like ADL to the state of Israel, because Zionism relies on Jewish insecurity to justify itself. Now, Candace Owens, honestly believing that these white people who are using her as their proxy to bash Black people, thought that white people that she's surrounded by were going to be consistent, right? They were going to be consistent. We bash the Blacks. We're willing to be honest about the Jews too. But no. She said, you're about to get into a lot of trouble for stating this. It reminds me of when I said something similar about the NAACP and BLM way back when you disrupt the trauma economy and call out the not-for-profits that benefit from it, you become their next target. At least I give Candace Owens that she is intellectually consistent. But here comes Ben Shapiro, the man who writes her checks. And what does he say? I think the ADL is a partisan hack organization too. But retweeting Max Blumenthal, who spends his life covering for Jew haters and stomping for Israel's destruction, makes the conversation significantly worse. It's garbage. And there is a video clip that if I felt like I would pull, which I was going to use for a whole video I was going to do about the hypocrisy of the right, but I just haven't bothered getting to, and I'm not sure I want to waste my time, where Ben Shapiro calls Max Blumenthal a traitor to the Jews. But this man is willing to write a check to Candace Owens and then make believe that he doesn't understand how the Black community, yes, even us Black conservatives, feel about her rhetoric. He will parade her around to falsely say and write her a check to falsely assert that slavery ended. And because there were no more slaves, white people had to start inventing machines to replace the slaves, when he is no idiot and knows darn well that the Industrial Revolution went on during slavery and ended before slavery. He was upset with Candace Owens for siding with Max Blumenthal because Max Blumenthal chooses to call out the Jews, and he considers Max Blumenthal somebody who covers for Jew haters, but he is using Candace Owens to cover for people who hate Black people. Do you see the hypocrisy? And this is why I said I wish I could pull that Matt Walsh clip where he said, the defense that someone else did it too is not a valid defense. Because one reason why the Republican Party will never get the Black conservative vote is because we all aren't willing to shuck and jive as hard as the Black people that cover for Black haters. In the same way that Ben Shapiro is not willing to tolerate Max Blumenthal, who covers for Jew haters. And that, my dears, concludes my presentation. I mean, what is going on here? It's absolutely ridiculous. And Lioness, you bring up a good thing, a good point. She's not even an American Black person. She's here giving commentary on our history, and this woman is not from the United States. Sis, fall back. Now, you guys know I don't get into the diaspora wars because Black is Black, but not you coming into an environment where your ancestors are not from and trying to throw us under the bus. Like, get that together. So you guys let me know what you think. Oh, Unbiased and Unbossed, you posted it? The first industrial revolution was 1765. The second was 1870. And the third was 1969. Right now, we are going through the fourth industrial revolution, aka Industry 4.0. Okay, if I gave you that, which I won't disagree with the assertion you're trying to make, I think it still lends to my point, right? Because that's why I covered a period of time from that ended in 1988, I think was the last thing that I spoke on. And that began in what, 1750? So that's why my commentary spanned the time from 1750 to 1988, right? And arguably, and stop there. So, I mean, I won't necessarily disagree with that assertion. What I will say is that she's incorrect. When we talk about the Industrial Revolution, we know that that fell between a certain time period. I acknowledge that it came in waves, which is why I addressed the Black codes and all of the stuff that came after that, because even if we move past that and we talk about the industrial growth that happened after slavery, until after the Second World War, they were still essentially using slave labor, mostly Black bodies, but they threw some white bodies under the bus too. Let's just keep it 1,000. I mean, white people enslaving their own is not a new thing. I just think that it's disingenuous for her to act as if there is an issue. Like I said, for me, she's no different than Max Blumenthal is to Shapiro. You know what I mean? You use historical inaccuracies to throw Black people under the bus, rather than just admitting slavery sucked. It was a wrong thing to do. And yes, America benefited from slave labor, both during chattel slavery and following through World War II, when we were heavily engaging in the convict leasing program. That would be honest, if we wanted to be honest. But see, here's the thing. Nobody wants to have an honest conversation. Everybody wants to come out smelling like roses. Now, I'm going to need people on both sides of the aisle, regardless of skin color, to come with that same energy. When I call Black people out for the stuff that we're doing, everybody's clapping and it's loved. But when I call out the hypocrisy of white conservatives, we're not so in love with that idea. And I'm not saying that's where you're going with it. I'm just saying that, we got to be intellectually consistent across the board, right? We have to be intellectually consistent across the board. Can you post that link again? Oh, you know what? It must be hidden. Let me look at it. It's at the 1 minute 29 mark. Let me see. I'm going to go to YouTube on my phone. And I'm going to see if I can see your comment. Give me 1 second. But yeah, so if I can get this clip, I hope you did get the clip. Let me see. Oh, I don't see a link posted though. I don't see your link posted. Probably post the link again for me, will you? Because if I can play that, I want to play it. Because I wasn't logged in on YouTube, I actually can't see. Any comments from that early in the stream. But with that said, you guys, if I don't get that link today, if you post it or you put it in the comment section, I will use that clip in the future. Because yeah, that somebody else did it too is not an excuse. Matt Walsh had me on the floor. I live for Matt Walsh's commentary, even though he's an ardent racist. Like, I agree with him on so many things, but the man is a racist. Let's not even get it twisted. He's a whole racist out here. Now, that doesn't mean we don't agree on some things, but I'm not going to sit here and make believe that man even remotely likes Black people. I mean, he likes the shucking and jiving of the Black slave drivers, but he's not really, you know what I mean, flexing with us like that. So with that said, you guys, I'm going to get out of here. I'll talk to you later. Let me know what you think in the comment section. I will be sure to post all of my sources because you guys know I don't throw out historical facts without going with reputable sources. I'm quoting everybody from Harvard to the government. You know what I mean? We just have to accept history. None of us gets to evade history because we don't like the way it makes us feel, right? There are things in Black history, and I don't like the way they make me feel. I'm sure there are things in white people's history. They don't like the way it makes them feel. But you know what? Your feelings don't matter. What matters are the facts. IMDPP said, do you think us Blacks will ever come together again? Truthfully, I think we need to disconnect from politics and give our full focus to the community. I think there are many Black people who do come together. That's why I started this thing off with a little video from the Zayeks Institute, because even though I don't agree with the idea of reparations, I do love to see our people working together and thriving. And there are a variety of people there. Just in my day-to-day life, recently when I was at church a couple weeks ago, we are picking a new pastor. So we have a lot of guest pastors coming in to speak. A pastor came in. They invited an African couple who had only been living in the country for 4 months now. And the first thing I did was invite her to my home. Do you know what I mean? I see in my day-to-day life, Black people working together. I also see those of us who are subverting the work that we're trying to do. So I think it's not a matter of will we come together. I think many of us do come together. But I think that we tend to focus on the division. And you guys know that my theory is you have to focus on the people that are functional. Like you're not going to see a person covered in urine, you know, a wino on the street and care about what they are spewing, right? And to me, we need to start looking at people who are being divisive, looking at people who are trying to tear down the community, who aren't on their purpose. We need to look at them like that, you know, wino covered in piss on the street. Okay, so he's murmuring some stuff at you, but how relevant is what he has going on? And we need to get behind the people who are putting in the work, get behind the people that are being productive, find ways to contribute to that. That's what I try to do. I just try to find the people that are putting in the work. I just try to find the people who are on their purpose. And then I make sure that I align with what they are doing so that they are supported. And that's why I encourage all of our people to do. I just think that is what matters. So with that said, y'all, I'm going to get out of here. Let me know what you think of everything that I said in the comment section. And for my patrons and my members, I have a list of videos. I'm going to smash them out. Give me a second to do that. I know I just dropped one video, but I have a few more that are coming to you, a couple of requested videos. So maybe I'll do them podcast style, but you guys know I like to show some visuals. So we'll see. But those are coming through the pipeline in the next few days. So I hope you enjoy them. I'll talk to you guys later.